Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to stick to Scotland and we're going to return to a brewery that's featured on the channel a good few times before. We've had some really nice beers from these guys over the years, a good few different styles, but the one that we're going to have a look at today is quite different and it's from a new range of beers that these guys have only recently released, and I have to say I'm very, very curious to see what this one has in store for us and what this particular range is going to have in store for us in the future. So hopefully this is another good one, hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this beer as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to head up to Aberdeen in the northeast of Scotland where I used to study chemistry. We're going to go a little bit to the northwest of the city to Dyce, and that means that we're going to have a look at another beer from Fierce Beer. Now this one comes from a new range of beers that they've released called Fierce by Nature, and these ones are barrel-aged sour beers. So this particular beer is simply called Brett IPA. It comes in at 5.8% ABV, and I think it should be pretty nice. It's brewed with Eldorado and Azacca hops, and then it's aged in French red wine and second fill American bourbon barrels. So yeah, this one should be pretty interesting actually, and this one was recommended to me by the guys in the Fierce Bar on Exchequer Row in Aberdeen. I actually bought this beer when I did my Out and About video back there quite recently. So yeah, this is one that comes directly from the recommendations of the guys at the Fierce Bar, which is pretty cool. But very, very curious to try this one. I've had a good few sour beers from these guys in the past, mainly fruity kind of Berliner Weisse type things though. So I think this one should make for an interesting expansion of that, I guess we should say. So let's crack on with this and see how we go. So as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Fierce Beer before, and we will no doubt add more to that list in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you happen to be interested in. Do check out the playlist of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Scottish beers that I've reviewed for you. That's being added to quite regularly at the moment because I am back home in the motherland of Scotland for a little while. And as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about Fierce Beer then, on to my brewery notes. So Fierce Beer, as I've mentioned to you already, is based in Dyce, which is to the northwest of Aberdeen, very close to the airport of course, and this company began its life as the homebrewing experimentations of David Grant, who worked for many years in the oil industry. So he'd been homebrewing since March of 2013, and after hosting a beer and food pairing dinner in May of 2015, where his beer happened to receive rave reviews, he decided that he really wanted to kind of push this further and turn professional. So Dave was joined early on at the brewery by Dave McGarry, who also worked in the oil industry for a number of years, but he used his redundancy package to put himself on a brewing course at Brew Lab in Sunderland down in England, and that place down there has actually produced a good number of craft brewers. In fact, there are a few in Scotland who've trained themselves there. But fast forward a little bit to April of 2016, and they moved into the brewery in the Kirkhill Industrial Estate in Dyce, again to the northwest of Aberdeen. And at the moment, these guys can brew in the region of 800,000 litres of beer per year. They've basically scaled this place up over the years since they started. But they started canning their beers in early 2018, and they now have their own bar on Exchequer Row in Aberdeen, which is called the Fierce Bar. You can check out my Out and About video that I did there, but they do want to move their brewery to a more central location in the city and have a big kind of brewery, tap room and restaurant sort of thing. But in May of 2019 they opened up a new bar on Rose Street in Edinburgh. I've actually walked past that the other day, and they also have a bar down in Manchester these days as well. But they're also introducing some spirits to the range now. I think it's gins and a few other things that they've been producing, and they've started on these barrel-aged sour beers as well with the Fierce by Nature range that they have. But I would say that this brewery are best known for their big kind of barrel-aged imperial stouts and stuff like this. Probably the best beers I've had from Fierce Beer have been the porters and the stouts and things like this. But in recent times they have been producing quite a few nice sessionable beers, and if you check out my Out and About video, you'll see me review a good few of those. But they have been putting out some nice lagers, IPAs, New England IPAs and stuff like that in recent times as well. But yeah, back in the day it was always the darker beers and the kind of fruity sours that were the best, but it is starting starting to change a little bit now. They've got some other very good stuff as well. But yeah, that's all I can really tell you about Fierce Beer for the moment. These guys are potentially one of the more recognisable Scottish craft beer brands at the moment. I know they put their beers all across the European continent. So yeah, these guys are probably one of the more accessible Scottish craft breweries for those of you in different places. But yeah, if you want to learn more about these guys, you can of course check out the Brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. But that is it for your history section of this video. Let's get on and have a look at the beer itself. So this one is actually a 500 milliliter half-litre bottle, which I was kind of surprised at actually, because it's not all that common to get sour beers, like especially barrel-aged sours, in big bottles like this. But all of the four that I've seen so far in the Fierce by Nature range have been in bottles like this one. You can see the bottle cap, oh, nearly knocking over my drum stool there, but the bottle cap is slightly different as well. There you can see Fierce by Nature, which looks very nice. But yeah, half-litre bottle. As I said to you, I bought this one at the Fierce Bar in Aberdeen. It came at their recommendation because there was 4 other ones there, and there was 2 that caught my eye. This was one of them, and I think I paid about £8 for this. When you consider that it's a half-litre bottle, I think that's pretty good for a barrel-aged sour. So this one would translate roughly £8 is what, maybe about €9.50, something like that, maybe about 95 Swedish kroner, and I guess somewhere in the region of like $11 American, something like that, just so that those of you watching in different places have an idea of what the price is of this one. But it says on the side here, we are passionate about making great flavoured beers with provenance. With our Fierce by Nature range, we focus entirely on mixed fermentation. We explore and experiment with Brettanomyces and other wild cultures to find nature's balance, then age and blend to create these beautifully crafted beers. And it tells you on the side here, this beer apparently was first produced in 2019. I didn't know they'd been doing things like this for such a long time, but maybe that is the original beer that they've just barrel aged. But it says this golden ale was brewed, aged and dry hopped with Eldorado and Azacca hops, a triple hopped Brett ale with a refreshing funky tartness and bitter hoppy finish. So yeah, the primary yeast used in this one was Brett Brettanomyces brucellensis. Then the next one is a Brett Clausenii, and then it tells you a little bit about that there. So let me just show you the fact thing that they've got on the side of this here. It is pretty cool actually. So yeah, you can see that apparently the pH of this beer, I guess that's maybe the pH of the sour wort or whatever, was 3.9. So that is pretty impressive. But yeah, lovely looking artwork on this one. Of course, this is quite a bit different to what we've seen from Fierce Beer in the past. Let me just let the camera focus on that. But yeah, it looks absolutely fabulous, this one. So yeah, let's get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting then. A 5.8% Brett IPA with Eldorado and Azacca hops, and aged in red wine and second fill bourbon cast as well. This one is, I'm just opening this very carefully so that we can get it and keep the bottle cap nicely. That's not too bad. I did get it off quite well. But yeah, let's get this guy out into the glass and see how we go. Yeah, going to be sharing this one with my dad after, because a half-litre of a sour beer is, I find it quite heavy. For me, I just like tasting sour beers. So I share most of these beers with my dad actually. He quite enjoys tasting them. But yeah, a half-litre of some of these big sour beers, it's quite heavy going. I've been to a sour beer festival, the Mikaela Bauhauen festival, and it was good, but man, that was heavy going. That was quite heavy going. But yeah, anyway, here we go. So before the head disappears from this one, you can see this beer has poured with about a quarter finger of a frothy, I would actually say perfect white head, but it is fading away to just be a very, very thin foamy layer and leaving a nice ring around the edge of the glass. The glass, no, you can say not the grass, but you can see that. It does look very, very nice, I have to say. But yeah, in terms of colour, this one is lovely. A very nice kind of rich yellow colour. It looks very, very nice. But yeah, I think in terms of what you'd expect for an IPA, it is pretty much what you'd expect. So yeah, it's kind of like it's almost like a golden ale in some ways as well. So remember, the colour of your beer depends on a few things. One, the type of malts that you use. This usually determines the EBC rating for the most part. The length of your wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. Any adjuncts that you put in and any barrel aging that you are going to do is going to affect the colour as well. And when this has got a red wine, has been aged by red wine barrels, I'm a bit surprised about the colour, because usually the colour of this of red wine barrel aged things can change a little bit, or at least it can in my experience. But bourbon barrels, they wouldn't affect the colour all that much in my experience. But yeah, it certainly looks nice. It's got a nice little bit of natural haze to it. But yeah, for a Brett IPA, if we just talk about a normal Brett IPA rather than even a barrel aged one, this is kind of what you would expect. I forgot to say about the hops in this one, of course. Both of these hops are American. El Dorado, I believe, is about 12% alpha acid. It's usually going to give you some nice kind of passion fruity, mango and pineapple notes. And then Azaka, again, is American at 14% alpha acid, and that's usually a bit of kind of, you know, sharp mandarin and a wee bit of pineapple and stuff like that too. So I'm interested to see how those will have kind of held out in this beer, in fact. But in terms of what you'd expect from a Brett IPA, I've not had one of these beers in a long time, incidentally, but in terms of what you might expect from appearance, this one is pretty much kind of bang on. So yeah, I like how this goes together. But yeah, that's enough about the appearance. Let's take a closer look at the aroma of this one then and just see how we go. I'm quite excited to try this because this is quite unusual and potentially one of the more expensive beers that I've bought from Fierce as well. So let's go for it. Let's see. Yeah. Straight away, I'm going to say it comes across as very well done. You know, the things that you're always going to compare these to would be like, you know, the Lambics or something like this, you know, these classic Belgian barrel-aged sour beers, and that holds up pretty well. I'm going to say straight away, my first impression of this one is it's quite smooth underneath, but it's got a little bit of a kind of spicy character to it, which I have to say I very much like. So, yeah, aroma-wise, this one ticks a lot of boxes for me. Yeah. Yeah, I like that, I'm just going to say. So yeah, let's try and break this aroma down for you a little bit more and just see how we go. So the backbone of this beer, absolutely, you can smell the different woody characters in there. So you can smell a little bit of the kind of smooth oak from the bourbon, but for me, you're actually getting a little bit of an almost kind of slightly spicy character from the wood as well. It does have a little bit of dryness to it. So you're getting that smooth, slightly vanilla-y, oaky note from the bourbon barrel, but I think the wine barrel is giving just a wee bit more of an almost spicy character, which is kind of unusual. You get a more spicy note and a little bit of dryness from the wine barrel in here. So that is pretty interesting for me. So there is maybe a kind of leathery character to this one as well. I think on top of the wood, there's definitely a wee bit of a slightly leathery sort of thing, particularly at the back of the nose. But I would also say there is a wee bit of a kind of brown bready character with this beer in the aroma too. It does say, actually, I've just seen that on the bottle, it says that it's got wheat and oats in it as well, so I'm curious to see how that's going to come out in the flavour, because I'm not getting too much of that in the aroma. Normally you'd get a little bit of bitiness from the wheat and you get a bit of kind of smoothness and slight dryness from the oats, but I'm not really picking that up in this one. The malty backbone of this beer really comes across as like a sort of crusty brown bready sort of thing. So that's pretty interesting on this when it comes to this beer for sure. But yeah, other than that, there's maybe a tiny little bit of a kind of, you know, McVitie's digestive biscuity sweetness to the malt base, but I'm not really getting all that much from this beer in that sense at all. On the malty side of things, it's, yeah, you get the smooth wood from the bourbon barrels, you get a little touch of vanilla in there, and you've also got a wee bit of that more kind of just dry, spicy, woody character from the wine barrels. And as I say, a bit of brown kind of wholemeal crusty bread on top of that, a wee bit of McVitie's digestive character. Other than that, I don't get too much out of the malt base here. So let's focus on the hoppy and kind of sour side of the beer then. So when it comes to the hops, I would wonder exactly when they've added the hops into this, because you do still get quite a little bit of grassiness and floral character out of this. So for me, there is a wee tiny little bit of earthiness in there. I do get that. There's a smooth floral aromaticity for sure. Then there's also a nice little bit of a kind of wetter, grassy, sort of zesty thing. So yeah, I like how that. I do like how that goes together in this beer for sure. So yeah, there's definitely a sort of green component to this one, which is kind of interesting, because you sometimes will get a little bit of it out of these beers, but not all that often, but to me this one comes across as quite fresh in the sort of hoppy character. So maybe they've, it does say this was packaged in January of 2020 and it's best before December of 2024. So yeah, I think he actually told me that this one came into the shop sometime around like February or March or something like that. I'm sure that was what they said. So they've had this one sitting in the shop for a wee while, and I'm drinking it in November, of course. But it does actually still come across as pretty fresh in that sense. But on the fruity side of the beer, if we ignore the sour part for the moment, we'll get to the sour part in a wee second. But for me, it's quite, it really has quite a nice, you do get a little bit of the kind of orangey mandarin-y note out of it, and definitely some sort of dried apricot-y characters underneath, for sure. So yeah, definitely a wee bit of a kind of juicy mango in there, some dried apricot underneath, and some nice kind of mandarin-y orangey characters. So yeah, the way that goes about its business is pretty nice on the fruity front. But mixed in with all of that, you can certainly get the nice kind of sharp sour note there. And I wouldn't describe this one as being overly sharp and kind of tangy and things. But yeah, it definitely has a wee bit of that sort of more lemony, citricy note. You can definitely get a sort of white, it's strange because you can get a sort of white winey character out of this one. I don't get so much of the kind of red winey character in there as well, this sort of vinous type thing. So yeah, the way that all goes together in this beer is pretty damn nice actually. So yeah, behind all those kind of quite soft and slightly oily fruits, just pushing its way through, you get that big citricy sour note from the barrel aging and the Brettanomyces. So yeah, aroma wise, this beer is pretty damn interesting actually. So as I always say, take a little bit of time to enjoy the aroma of the beers before you get stuck into them, but I think it's about time that we have a taste of this. So yeah, this one is the Brett IPA from the Fierce by Nature range at Fierce Beer in Dyce in Aberdeen, coming in, what do we say, 5.8% ABV. Let's go for it and see how we got on then. Slàinte, skål, and cheers. That's pretty nice actually. First impression of this one is it's actually quite smooth and drinkable. It's almost got, you know, the drinkability of some of the lager beers and the West Coast IPAs that I've had from these guys. So yeah, wasn't quite expecting that. I was expecting, I suppose at 5.8%, it's not the biggest barley sour beer that you're going to come across, but it's actually, it's one of these ones where a lot of the flavour and a lot of the subtleties of it come out in the aftertaste. That's the first impression I'm getting of this, but that's a nice beer. That is nice. Yeah, I'm going to say I like this one. If the other ones in this series are like that, I maybe need to try and get a hold of the other three that were in this as well. I think they were selling the three of them as a kind of package on the website actually. But yeah, this is pretty nice, I have to say. I do like how this one goes together. So, yeah, what can we say about this then? I'm just going to say first off, it's a really smooth but quite slick and just drinkable sour beer. This one really shows you a lot of its kind of more kind of sour barrel aged type qualities in the aftertaste, but it's certainly, compared to what the aroma shows you, I would certainly say this is not the most tart of you know, wild ales that you're going to come across. It's just one of these ones that's really smooth and subtle and just really very, very nicely done. So I like it for sure. Let's break this down then. So, yeah, for this one then, let's go for it. So straight away across the middle of your palate, you'll feel that nice, smooth, oaky, woody character that goes right across the middle of your palate there, and I really like how that comes out of this one. So yeah, lovely, smooth, oaky kind of characters there, middle third and back third of your palate. It sits there. And I would say that on top of that woody note, it's very smooth towards the kind of front of the middle third of your palate, but as you go further back, it does get a little bit sort of drier and slightly spicy into the back third of your palate. So that's kind of interesting, the way these woody characters go together. I would say that almost in the back half of that middle third of your palate, it's got a little bit more of a slightly leathery character to it, which is quite interesting. But yeah, the way that this goes together from the barrel aging side of things is really interesting. I guess what they will have done with this is they'll have taken half of it, pardon me, put it in the French red wine barrel, and the second half they'll have put it in the bourbon thing. I don't think they take the whole batch, age it in one, then age it in the other. I don't think that's what they do. I think it's usually blended. But obviously correct me on that in the comment section below if I'm wrong. But yeah, the way that these flavours kind of go together is just really nice. So I think the bourbon, probably if you tried this straight out of the French red wine barrel, it would be really, really sharp and tart. But then adding the bourbon side to it just kind of smoothens it out a little bit more. So yeah, I think that's quite an interesting thing to think about this for sure. So yeah, let's keep going with it then. But I think that covers the barrel aging side of this one. I think it's nice. You maybe just get a little touch of a slightly nutty character towards the front of that middle third of your palate, and maybe just a little bit of vanilla from the bourbon side of things as well. But yeah, a little bit of brown sugar, I think, a little bit of that kind of bourbony brown sugar on that front half of the front third of your palate too. But yeah, the way that these woody characters all blend together is very, very nice. So, yeah, I think let's focus on the middle third of the palate then. So on top of all that kind of woody character, you've got a nice sort of, you do have a nice kind of brown bready character coming out of this one. So yeah, I do like how that goes together. So you get a soft kind of, you do get a little bit of a kind of brown bready bread crust in there, then you can feel the slightly lighter brown bread sitting on top of that. In the dead centre of your palate, you've got a nice little circle there, where it's a little bit like a kind of McVitie's digestive biscuity sort of thing. Then potentially right in the dead centre of your palate, you do get a little touch, just a very small circle of a sweet, oily caramel. So again, I really like how this goes together for sure. But yeah, the way that works out is very, very nice for sure. Yeah, it's yeah, I do like how this how that side of it goes together. I think the more that you drink of this, the more that the kind of woody character smoothens out, but you also get a little bit more sweetness out of the malty side of the beer too, which I think is really nice. I have to say, I do wonder how much of the smoothness in this beer is coming from the oats, and it doesn't really show itself as a kind of specific flavour, but the woodiness, I think the smoothness of some of the oaky characters in this is promoted a little bit by the oats. But that's, it's really interesting just to think about that and the middle third of your palate. So yeah, interesting for sure. Let's focus on the border region then between middle third and back third of your palate. You've got a nice kind of big, you can feel that there's a little bit of a kind of bread crusty build up in there. So yeah, nice little bit of a kind of bread crusty build up there. And on the back third of your palate, you can feel the on top of the kind of woody characters that we spoke about earlier, but you can feel all of those just do get a little bit kind of drier. You can feel there is a wee bit more of a kind of stronger bread crusty note there, still a bit of smooth brown bread, and then on top of that you have a nice, you have a very nice kind of you do have a very nice sort of, gives more yeasty character coming out of the beer. You can feel there's a little bit of a slightly, woody, crackery, doughy, yeasty kind of thing just sitting on top of that. So you can feel that at the back of the palate, you can feel the flavours a little bit taller, but as you come further forward, it just condenses down a wee bit. Then as you go into the middle third of your palate, these flavours are just a little bit more kind of squashed together, if you like. And I think that works out, really, really nicely in this one. So the way that the malty, barrel aging and yeasty side of this beer goes together is pretty much spot on. Let's focus on the hops and the kind of sour side of the beer then. Let's look at that. So some of the hops are definitely still in there, but remember, whenever you age a beer or whatever, the hops are going to come out, especially when it sits in the bottle. the hops are going to gradually drop out of it. But in the back corners of the palate, there's definitely a nice little bit of a smooth earthiness there. As you move further forward, it's got a little bit of a herbal quality, and as you push towards the kind of front corners of the palate, it's got a little bit more of a kind of floral aromatic sort of thing going on with it. So again, I really like how it pieces together there. But the floral aromaticity is quite smooth in a sense, and it does have a wee touch of spiciness to it, but I think that's coming from the barrel aged side of the beer. But round the front curve of the palate, it's definitely a little bit lighter and grassy. There's a wee bit of zestiness in there, and it's kind of like a wet, freshly cut grass. But let's focus on that front third of your palate and the fruity sides of the beer. So border region between front third and middle third of your palate, again you get a little bit of that kind of brown bready build up there. The base of the front third of your palate, you can feel some of the more smooth bourbon woody characters in there, just a little bit of brown bread, and on top of that you get that nice oily bubble where those juicy fruity esters roll their way out of the beer. At the back of that front third of your palate, you're getting the more kind of tropical notes. So it's mainly the El Dorado for me. So I do get a little bit of a kind of juicy mango-y sort of thing, but underneath, of course, you've got that nice sort of dried apricot-y character. Then as you push into the kind of front half of that front third of your palate, you can feel there's a little bit more of a kind of mandarin-y. There's a little bit more of a sort of mandarin-y orangey character there, but it's a bit dried actually. You do get a little bit of that kind of dried mandarin-y orange, and also just a wee bit of pineapple sitting on top. But it's interesting because almost right in between the kind of tropical and more citrusy flavours, you can feel the sour part of the beer just pushing its way up. So you do have a little bit of that kind of white wine sort of dried white green grapey sort of thing coming out of this one. You can just feel that pushing out of the beer a little bit more. So, yeah, there's a little bit of that coming out of this one. For sure, you can feel that just pushing its way out. But like I say, this is not the tartest of beers that you're going to come across. Actually, you do get quite a little bit of gooseberry, I think, out of this the further you go into the aftertaste. But yeah, fruity wise, yeah, nice juicy mango, bit of apricot underneath in the front half. Yeah, oily, like juicy tangerine orange, a bit of pineapple on top. Then you can feel that gooseberry and sort of citricy sharpness pushing its way out of the beer the further you go into the aftertaste too. But yeah, I think the way that this goes about its business for sure is very, very nice. So yeah, I think that's everything we really need to say about the flavour of this beer, so we can round off by looking at the mouthfeel. So on that note, mouthfeel wise, I'd say this beer is actually kind of mid-bodied. I think it's right in the middle of the spectrum. The carbonation is quite smooth. It's actually quite slick and oily in a lot of ways. Not the biggest oily beer right enough, but it's got a little bit, it's mainly quite slick, and it just has that wee bit of a kind of oiliness to it as well, which I think works. So, on the kind of malty and, you know, on the actual flavour of the beer, I think in terms of hoppy bitterness, I'd be surprised if this has got too much. You know, this is going to have like, you know, 10, 15 IBUs at most. There's a little bit of that. But the smoothness of this beer, the backbone of this beer is very nice and smooth and woody. There's a wee bit of breadiness and graininess in what was also a little bit of sweetness for me too. But the fruity side of the beer, again, is, you know, it's quite a light, oily character that you get out of it. Leans towards the drier side of things, and then there's just a little bit of a kind of just a little touch of sour character to this one. It's really not all that sour at all, to be honest with you. So yeah, this is just a really, really nicely done and actually quite easy drinking barley sour, this one. It's really, really well done. So I think I need to have a look at some of the other ones in this series from Fierce Beer, because I have been quite impressed with this one. Definitely one of the more subtle ones that I've come across, but it could well just be that my palate's adjusting to these now that I've had the lambics and the big beasts and stuff like this. But I think this is pretty well done. So I can, this one, I'm sure I was told in the shop that this one has won a good number of awards and things like that. But yeah, I think it's that this one is really well done, in fact. So yeah, we can leave it there. This one is the Brett IPA, part of the Fierce by Nature range from Fierce Beer in Dyce in Aberdeen. I really enjoyed this one. This potentially has been one of my favourite reviews that I've done from Fierce so far, actually. So yeah, keep that in mind. Keep that in mind. We do have a couple of other beers to review from these guys. I'm sure I've got a Scotch Ale, a Black IPA, and I think there's something else as well, if memory serves me correctly. So you'll see those reviews appearing over the next little while. But again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Fierce Beer. We will return to these guys soon, as I've said. Check out my social media, check out theirs, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. This is the Brett IPA, 5.8% ABV, part of the Fierce by Nature range from Fierce Beer in Dyce, just to the northwest of Aberdeen. Slàinte, skål, and cheers.